listening to Bring Me the Axe. I'm Brian White, one half of this morbid equation, and I'm joined by my co-host and brother, Dave White. Dave, how you doing?
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that.
I'm all right. We were supposed to go see the Dawn of the Dead last night.
Oh, yeah, you didn't go?
We didn't go. This is the second time in as many weeks that I've had tickets to go to the theatre, and blew it off because I'm a lazy sack of shit. And, yeah, I felt kind of bad about it, but we ended up going out to dinner instead, and it was probably one of the worst dining experiences I've ever had. So
things are just awesome all around.
It was a real shit sandwich, but there is some really good stuff coming up in the theater soon. If anybody lives in Boston area, the Brattle and the Coolidge Corner theaters, I think Halloween. They're playing Halloween tonight.
Ooh, that's fancy.
Yeah, Halloween 2 and 3, I think, are coming up. There's that Ishiro Honda birthday thing that's coming up.
That's right.
Week after next, I think, at Brattle. So I'm gonna pretend I'm gonna go to the movies, and the day will come and I won't go. So.
Oh, that's right. That's right. The Dawn of the Dead thing was part of the whole Salem Horror Fest.
Yeah.
Which was not in Salem, curiously.
Yeah, I don't really know why.
Yeah. I think maybe they just got all this print material and they're just like, well, I'm not going to pay for new shit. I may as well just keep calling it Salem Horror Fest. But, who knows?
Yeah, it looked like it was a good time, but I mean, I just watched that movie and it's long and I'm old.
It's really. I mean, we did just recently do it. Yeah. I get you. I spent the week down in Raleigh, North Carolina for work. Yeah. You know what that means, don't you?
Toilet wine?
Oh,
that's disgusting.
There's a bottle of cheer wine right there.
I don't know what that is.
Let's open this up. Shh.
Nothing.
Ooh, yeah.
I don't. It just looks like gross knockoff Dr. Pepper. What is this?
I'm gonna try
this Mr. Pibb?
I'm gonna give it a taste. I'll tell you. It's good. It's got notes of cherry and hints of vanilla.
So it really is. It's like knockoff cherry Coke.
It's basically it's more cherry than Coke, but that's the general idea, I think. Yeah.
Gross.
It's it's fucking awesome. It's fucking awesome, and I'll tell you what, it's part of our brand now. So if the makers of Cheer Wine want to send me some shit, I certainly wouldn't say no.
Yeah, I'll do anything for money.
I'm talking about just free Cheer Wine.
That's a low bar.
What are you drinking over there?
I am drinking Anna, which is a farmhouse ale from Hill Farmstead.
Is it not toilet wine?
It is not toilet wine. It is absolutely fantastic beer.
Okay.
That I drove across the multiple states to get, and I will do it again.
That's awesome. Hey, so we practically grew up in neighborhood video stores, and the steady diet of utter garbage that those shops provided us with continues unabated to this day. And there's no one else I enjoy chopping it up with more about trashy movies than Dave. Just before we get into it, there's a little housekeeping. If you want to keep up with us between episodes, you can also find us on Instagram at Bring Me the Axe Pod. Dave's over there at that Queer Wolf. We're having a good time. I encourage you to follow us if you do the Instagram thing. It's we play a game every week. It's a good time.
Yeah, I like to share pictures of Naomi Campbell. It's a bunch of gay shit. It's basically it. Horror movies.
It's Simpsons stuff.
Yeah.
Also on brand.
Yeah.
Yep. Also over there on TikTok, doing the TikTok thing. If you do that, just search for us by name. We come up pretty easily. Yep. And if you don't know, we have another show. It's called 99 Cent Rental, where we cover all manner of video store madness on the weeks that Bring Me the Axes off. Our latest episode, covering the 1990s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, is out now with guest Eileen Clark from Wike Horror, the Latinx horror podcast that we love so much.
She is a goddamn delight. I love her. All the time. Love them both, but this particular time around, love her.
She's kind of our mascot at this point.
I wonder how she'd feel about that.
She's like, God damn it, you guys. Don't rope me into this bullshit.
Yeah.
Yep, and we're going to be back next week with a look at the Charles Bronson naked serial killer picture, 10 to Midnight. And I'm looking forward to that one because that movie is silly as hell.
We have another guest for that. It's going to be very exciting.
We do. I'm looking forward to it. So, yeah, you can also contact us directly at bringmetheaxepod@gmail.com. With any questions, comments, or suggestions, do let us know if there's a movie that you love and would like to hear us give it the business. And lastly, if you like what you hear, you can subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube now. Search us by name and subscribe if you prefer to consume your podcast that way. And you'd be doing us a favor by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Please do. It's fun. It'll make you feel good.
I don't know if it's fun. It's very helpful.
It is helpful. I don't know. It's not fun.
I mean, it's fun. You may be a bit of a weirdo, but that's okay.
I see people being like, ha 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 ha, as they push the buttons.
I always picture people like, if you're anything like me, typing away like dogs at a keyboard. I'm just like slapping things randomly. That's what I'm envisioning when someone is having a good time on the computer.
Yeah, just laughing out loud, going, I'm using the internet.
Yep, that's basically me.
Yep. If you listen on YouTube, do us a favor, give the episode a like, and leave a comment. We love hearing from you guys. So I just want to get all that out of the way right at the top of the show, because here we go. We'll give you a taste of what we're talking about tonight.
Heading west on the long, lonely highway, only his dreams for company. Until...
My mother told me never to do this.
Before many miles, he'll wish he'd taken his mom's advice. When Jim Halsey let the Hitcher into his car, he opened the doors of hell.
What do you want?
I want you to stop me. Once you've met the Hitcher, you'll never pick up another.
My wallet's in my pocket.
Shut up! We know how to do it.
Jesus! Why are you doing this to me?
You're a smart kid. Figure it out.
I didn't do it. I didn't do any of it. I'm not a killer.
Hold on!
This morning, this guy tried to kill me, and he's been following me ever since.
Why didn't he kill us?
Hi, kid.
I don't want to die! Yeah!
The terror starts the moment you stop for the Hitcher.
What do you want?
I want you to stop me.
There it is, The Hitcher.
Look, I'm going to give you a hot take right at the top. This movie is very badly written.
You know, we're going to get into that because I think we intended to do this one last year, and we just kind of kept kicking it down the schedule until eventually it just wasn't on the schedule anymore. And I definitely wanted to do this one because it's a movie that I remember enjoying quite a bit. And while it's definitely not the movie that I remember it, I certainly like it. It's got a lot going for it, but it's also got a lot of just weird, disjointed shit going on.
I think it was on TV a lot. Was it like this? Because this is an HBO movie, and I think it was on HBO a lot.
It definitely was, and I think that's probably where I first saw it.
Yeah.
It's like there's no way, there's just no fucking way that. Like,
I mean, that's where I watched it this time too.
Oh yeah. Was it the really fucked up, weirdly formatted?
Yeah,
one
it looked
with,
like shit. It was standard
Christ.
definition, and the ratio was like, I don't even know what the hell it was. It looks real bad. The movie
Yeah.
looks muddy and really dark most of the time.
Yeah, I watched. I streamed a version of it that was like from some German version of it that was called The Highway Killer. And so yeah, that's it. So that one wasn't quite as bad, but it was also like chopped in the way like the aspect ratio was just broken. You know,
I
there's
wonder.
whole parts of it.
Wonder why they called it The Highway Killer. wonder if the Hitcher just wouldn't have made sense. And
Oh, it was called Der Hitcher, Der Highway Killer. So yeah, it was the whole thing. But yeah, I mean, maybe just because in Germany, like the notion of hitchhiking is.
Well, it's not that hot here either anymore. Thanks a lot, serial killers.
I know, Jesus Christ, Edmund Kemper, you ruined it for everybody. Yep. So, shall we go down the list here? Shall we do the facts?
I don't see why not.
No, we're gonna do them anyway.
That's the whole point.
Yep. So the year was 1986, year of our Lord. So here's some other movies that were released in 1986. Little Shop of Horrors was released in 1986. A delightful little musical.
That is one of Michael's favorite movies.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's cool. Yeah, it's a good movie. I hate they're remaking it.
Yes. Well, it's on Broadway again now, and I think they are. I think John Landis and somebody else who was originally involved in it.
All right. Well.
Or maybe Joe Dante. I think it's Joe Dante. Not John Landis.
Yeah. Also that year, Ken Russell's Gothic was released, which is a pretty good one. Sorority House Massacre came out in 86.
Boo.
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen that one.
It's trash.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. It's no House on Sorority Row.
No. How do we know she is alive?
Listen to our House on Sorority Row episode.
Or at least watch the movie. It is fantastic.
Definitely watch the movie because it's great. Also, in this year, 1986, Michael Mann's Manhunter came out, which is the first in the Hannibal Lecter movies. It's pretty good.
It's got a great soundtrack.
Good. Badass soundtrack.
It's Tangerine Dream.
Yeah, fucking great, man. And rounding it out, 1986, From Beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah, tremendously fun.
That movie is gross as hell.
A little bit more of that Stuart Gordon, H.P. Lovecraft business, Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton. I refer to our recent Reanimator episode. It was the last one we did. So cast and crew, we got a director by the name of Robert Harmon. And this is his very first feature. Before he took over the director's chair, he was still like a still photographer, which you can see all over this movie. Mm-hmm. There's some really stunning shots that definitely look like they were informed by someone who was familiar with composing like an interesting still photo.
Well, I think too, John Seals was a DP on this. He's done a lot of like, not road movies, but like fast moving action movies, which I think explains why there's so much shit. Like he picked the right person to do for cinematography because there's so much that like happens in cars moving fast. And I think a lot of it, like a lot of landscape shots that look really great.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely something about that probably really kind of sticks with me because even though I don't really find the central mystery terribly compelling now that I've like watched it a couple of times.
Well, there isn't really a mystery. They give you the whole story right up front.
I think that there is, but it's simply implied in a way that I think is not intended. It's just how I tend to interpret the movie in order to make it make any sort of sense. But also, I love a fucking car chase movie. And there is some awesome car crashes and just car chase action in this movie.
Yeah, there are some big explosions that I think are this more. I don't really. It's hard to think of this as a horror movie because it's really not. It's more of an action movie.
It was made with like a slasher movie in mind, but it's way more of a, I don't know, just a suspense movie, really, or a thriller, if you want to sort of get down to the genres of it all. It's not strictly a horror movie.
Yeah, it has a lot of like, it has a big too many cooks feel to it. Like a lot of people got involved in this, and I mean, I think the script is probably not very good to begin with, but I think a lot of people got involved and fucked with it. And in the end, I did not like this film, obviously, but
yeah, we'll talk about the script in a minute and the writer, because he's kind of like one of the reasons that I sort of want to talk about this, because he's definitely responsible for a couple of like real like horror movie hits and some fucking misses for sure.
I think mostly misses. I can think of one hit, and even that's a little questionable.
But yeah, anyways, back to Bob Harmon. He after this, he sort of does a lot of low budget genre stuff and a ton of made for TV stuff. Notably, he works with Tom Selleck almost exclusively.
Yeah, are they friends? They seem like they must have some sort of relationship.
They must be like they must have hit it because it's this like Jesse Stone cop movies, which I've never seen and I had like barely heard of until I looked this up. And it turns out there's like a fucking dozen of them.
Are they like TV movies? They seem like TV movies.
Yeah, they are. I think he also works on that show Blue Bloods.
Yeah, he does.
So we got a cast here. It's headed up by C. Thomas Howell, who left a huge impression on the world as Ponyboy in Coppola's The Outsiders. And then he flushed it all down the toilet with Soul Man, a movie too racist even for the 1980s.
I find Soul Man to be a really remarkable movie, not because of what it is. I mean, that's pretty obvious. But like the fact that this thing had to go through hundreds of people and at no point was anyone like, nope.
I know. Have you ever seen it?
Oh, yeah.
It's ridiculous.
That's another one. I mean, for anyone who does not know, the premise is that a guy is trying to get into college and is not doing very well. And so he decides to exploit affirmative action by painting his face with shoe polish and pretending to be black. Now, it is a comedy. Supposedly, it is also a disgusting and horrifying premise that everybody just seemed pretty cool with.
I don't know, because after this, there's kind of a lull in his career.
Well, he's also not a very good actor.
Well, I disagree. I think that he's actually, I don't think he's great. I think that he's adequate. He's good. He sells things. He's great in The Outsiders. I think that he's even pretty good in Red Dawn. He's the sort of casualty of war in that one. And he sells fear very effectively in this one. But he's definitely like one of the sort of like cute boy actors of the 80s.
I think that's the problem. I think is that because he is very cute and he plays that role very well, but he doesn't age well because he still looks like now he looks like an old baby. And it's a little off-putting. And so it's like when you're cute like that and then like you sort of age out, and it's like, oh, now you're just a little awkward looking and everyone's a little bit uncomfortable.
He definitely does like still look like classic C. Thomas Howell, but like on break in the at the smoke break at the AA
yeah,
meeting.
But he like it's Henry Thomas is also a little bit like that. Like they all just kind of have this haunted look about them.
Henry Thomas, yeah, but he's sort of like
I think really he's a better actor, but
he's making a comeback in those Mike Flanagan movies. I'm definitely more pleased to see him than C. Thomas Howell because he just seems to show up
because he was not in Soul Man.
Yep. Yeah. But like, yeah, the thing with Howell is like he stays pretty busy, but on like a lot of just sort of like episodic TV, but also The Asylum kept him really fucking busy for a while there with their mockbusters. Ooh. Yeah. And then, you can't really mention this movie without Rutger Hauer is fucking awesome in it. He's definitely a reason to watch the movie.
He's the reason to watch the movie because honestly, I do think this is a terrible script. I think it looks good a lot of the time, but if there's anything compelling about it, it's his performance. It's a lot weirder and more nuanced than I think anybody expected it should be or wanted it to be. It's the only thing that's like, well, this is interesting. Keep going.
Yeah, because there's not a lot to really know about this movie. It's one of those just kind of like, it was just a production that happened in the 80s. There's not anything really remarkable about it. Like the only shit that I kept finding that kept popping up in my research was like, Rutger Hauer was not the first choice. Like it was all these other people and they scared the hell out of the producers, which I doubt. But,
yeah, I'm sure.
But he's fucking great. But he had one of the weirdest career trajectories like in the history of film.
He's a very stunning looking person, like just generally. Like I don't mean like physically. I mean he is a very attractive man, but like he's very kind of captivating to look at. I think because he has very like something about his eyes. He's just very like if you see him in Blade Runner, it's like wow, I just am fascinated to look at you.
He has a very fierce appearance.
Yes.
That's his thing. There's like a smoldering kind of menace about him. Like he's very, very much the guy that like in his day you wanted to play a bad guy in your movie.
He's who's the one Max von Sydow, he looks a little bit like him when he was younger, like very sort of just it's like a stunning person.
Yep. Before he left his mark on the world as Roy Batty and Ridley Scott's amazing fucking Blade Runner. He had a decade of Dutch film experience. And then he seems to take a deep dive into really crappy low-budget weirdness. He makes this movie called Wanted Dead or Alive. It's not very good. It's sort of an adaptation of the TV show. He does a bunch. He does a little bit with Albert Pune. He does his sort of Red Harvest adaptation, Omega Doom. And he does a really fucking bizarre buddy cop movie in 1992 called Split Second. Have you seen Split Second?
Never. No, I've never even heard of it.
I would say we do it, except it's just maybe it's just me, but I think it's a really fucking stupid movie. But there's so many people that I know who are like, this movie is genius. It's fucking hilarious. It's unbelievably weird. It's definitely weird. He flashes his badge at a dog several times throughout the movie and calls it dickhead while he like interrogates the dog. It's bizarre. It's very fucking bizarre.
And those were his choices. Like, everything he does in this movie was Rutger Hauer who made the choice. I don't think this movie is really well directed, if it's directed at all.
No, there's definitely some notes that like a lot of the stuff, like when he's in the car, like with the knife to Howell's face, like all that shit is him just ad-libbing.
Because we're gonna get into the queer reads of this that I have a big problem with, but I think a lot of it has to do with his performance.
Yeah. But to that thing about like him ad-libbing, I guess he was such a pain in the ass in Split Second that the director was like, "Fuck this, I quit," and did. Nice. It had to be finished by the film's editor. He stayed pretty busy up to his death. But he was also in Argento's absolutely wretched 3D Dracula movie.
Oh, that might be the worst Argento movie out there. And his output in the 90s and early 2000s is not good.
I'm going to say everything after The Card Player is pretty rough going.
Yeah.
But anyways, rounding it out, we got Jennifer Jason Leigh. She was Vic Morrow's daughter. Never knew that.
Yeah.
She left a real impression on everybody a couple of years prior in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And then she went into the 90s with another role that turned into a cultural synonym for stalkers with a single white female. And nowadays, she seems to do a fairly varied mix of acting, writing, and directing. She does like a lot of indie stuff.
Yep.
And she was a creative partner with Alan Cumming. And also, she does a lot of shit on Broadway.
She did not need to be in this movie. This character does not need to be in this movie. It does nothing for the story.
Her character is just like somebody was like, we got to have a chick in this movie. Yep. So here's some taglines for the movie. And none of them are very good.
Nope.
This one was right in the trailer. The terror starts the moment he stops.
Which is too clumsy.
I don't...
But you know what? I think if anything sums up this movie, it's clumsy.
Yeah. Here's another one. Whatever you do, don't stop for the Hitcher.
The Hitcher.
Not bad.
Never pick up a stranger is the other one.
Never pick up a stranger. And then here's one that another really clumsy one. He came from hell. Don't ask him where he wants to go.
What? Shut up. I find the basic premise of this a little bit strange because this is 86, and I think this took a little bit of a ways to get to completion. But by the 80s, hitchhiking was not really a thing people did.
I did a bit of it in the 90s.
Desperation, maybe. But the 70s really killed. I mean, no pun intended, but really killed hitchhiking for most people. Because, man, lots of ladies got killed that way.
Yep, yes, they did. So the script was inspired by the Doors song Riders on the Storm.
I heard another version in which he claims that he had a similar situation happen to him where he picked up a creepy hitchhiker. And I was like, okay.
Okay, well, as we're going to learn, Eric Red...
Bit of a liar.
And crazy.
Yeah.
So, yeah. This is also not the first time that Rutger Hauer played a character named John Reiner. The first time was in a 1979 Dutch movie called Es Began bij Tiffany.
That old classic.
Yep. Then let's see. There was a sequel made in 2003. It's a direct-to-video thing. I've not seen it. I'm sure it's terrible.
Yeah. There's a remake, too, isn't there?
Yep. Remake in 2007.
Man, that that era of like, let's remake the fucking bottom of the barrel bullshit is like, why? Why are you doing this? Make better movies.
I don't, it was 2007 when they made that remake, and it was like, were they really at that point where they had to hit up like obscure?
I'm going to tell you what. Here's my thought on this, because I spent a lot more time like on the sort of reevaluation angle, the queer read angle of this that got very irritating for me. But there's something about I don't want to.
You had mentioned that to me before, that there was a sort of queer angle on this in the first place, and then maybe that's what sort of made me want to put this one on the list, because I'm definitely interested in it. But having watched it a couple of times, I don't see that at all.
Well, like I said to you, there is a discussion about queerness around this movie to be had. It's not the one people are having, I don't think, but I think there is there's a desire, and I see this maybe coming probably more from younger viewers, to want to rediscover things. Like, everybody's got Halloween and Friday the 13th. Like, there's the big fucking names. And I think for younger horror fans, I think there's maybe some kind of delight in finding things that you did not previously know about and that nobody else seems to care about. And the thing about that is, there's usually a reason why nobody cares about them, because they're typically not very good. And so I think that's why we're starting to see like people being like, oh, this rediscovered classic. And it's like, no, it's just a fucking bad movie. That's why, like, when people are when shit's getting reissued.
It's like last year around Christmas when everybody was like, that old cult classic Elves. Yeah. And we're like, before 2023, we'd never heard of this movie.
Same with, what's the Thanksgiving one? Blood Rage. Yeah, same thing. Yeah. That's like, nobody'd seen that until, 2017. And I'm not knocking people for that. Like, that's just how people find shit. It's whatever. But I do think it's kind of interesting, like, all this desire to be like, oh, this undiscovered classic. And it's like, listen, here's how capitalism works. If there's money to be made, there's no such thing as an undiscovered classic. If you're unfamiliar with something or it's not available, it's because it's fucking trash and nobody's going to buy it. Now, that's not a hard, fast rule, but like, generally speaking, like, these things are like, oh, this lost gem. And it's like, it's not a lost gem. It's a movie only 1,000 people are going to buy, or 1,000 people are going to give a shit about. Like, if you've never heard of it, it's because it's not that good. That doesn't mean you won't enjoy it or it's not fun, but it's just not as big as people seem to think it is.
Right, because as we've talked, we've really sort of tossed around this sort of theory of cult film, and the one constant that we keep coming across is like, this is a movie, like, cult movie X is a movie that maybe didn't hit when it first dropped, but eventually kind of found its audience afterwards. The Hitcher didn't.
No, this one gets called a cult film over and over. It's like, this is not a cult film. It's also not a good film. Like, it's fun to watch, I guess, for some people, but it's not, like, objectively speaking, it's not good. It's technically not good.
Yeah. It was commercially, it was a fucking failure. It didn't really even hit on VHS. It had to get kind of saturated through HBO in order for it to really reach people. Also, critics, as I'm sure you've got some notes on, fucking hated it.
Oh, and I actually want to get into that because I think that's a good pivot into the other thing. But we don't have to get there yet. But the criticism of this film is very interesting.
Yeah. Save that, because I do want to address the movie's writer, because the guy who wrote this is a dude we mentioned named Eric Red. This was his first. This was not his. He directed some indie called like Gunman's Blues that sounds positively terrible, and then he wrote this and he'd been sitting on it for a while, and then eventually sells it. But the original version of this movie was like 3 hours long or something
more
like
than that. It was 180 pages, 190 pages or something.
Which is crazy. Yeah, like I obviously I don't think he knew like the sort of 1-page rule.
No, I also don't think he knew how to write a script or a story.
Yeah.
Because this movie is not this narratively speaking, this is very sloppy.
Yeah, he gets this sort of results in a short but very notable run, mostly having to do with Catherine Bigelow, really.
Which is weird, because she's a very talented filmmaker.
Well, I think that's why Near Dark is as good as it is. It starts with Catherine Bigelow. It ends with a really bizarre crime that he ends up walking away from completely free of consequence. So, what you said, The script was originally nearly a 3-hour movie. It was entirely defined by extremely long, extremely graphic scenes of violence and sex. And then it goes through a lot of revisions, which you noted. It seems like there was a lot of cooks in the kitchen who were sort of guiding this towards something that the studio wanted to make, because like in its original incarnation, like they were like, there's no fucking way that we'd ever get an R rating with this. And so they just kept cutting it down and cutting it down and cutting it down until we get the movie that we get. Obviously, a central theme to it is vehicle violence. And after this one, he does Near Dark, which rules and also features a lot of cars crashing into people and through buildings. And
that story is saved by really good acting and I think really good direction.
Oh yeah,
because he seems like he's trying to do this kind of like Western, like he seems captivated by the mythology of the American West. It does not come across in this movie, I don't think. I think it does a little bit better in Near Dark. I think if you want, like, what he's trying to do is essentially what, what's his face, Richard, in Dust Devil, like this idea of like the desolation and isolation, and in this it does not come up.
Dust Devil definitely has a lot in common with this movie,
but it is much better. Like it is a much better because he's a very talented person. He's also a very crazy person.
Oh yeah, that dude's also a fucking creep, like crazy.
But I think as a writer, I mean, and I think you can see it. That's why he hasn't done a lot, because he's just not that good at it.
Well, no. He hasn't done a lot, and I'm going to get into the why he hasn't done a lot, because it's fucking terrible. So again, I just want to establish a pattern here, because then he does Blue Steel with Bigelow again, which ends up with somebody getting run down by a car. And after that, he does Body Parts, which fucking sucks, but it also features shocking scenes of vehicular violence. And then he even wrote an unproduced horror movie called Highway to Hell about a semi-truck possessed by a serial killer that runs down people, and then another unproduced script about a cult of people who run people over with their cars for fun.
Listen, he really, really liked Duel. Like he saw it and was like, oh my God, that's the best movie I've ever seen in my life.
In such a way that he perhaps wanted to do it himself, because in May of 2000, Red rear-ends a car in traffic on Wilshire Boulevard in Hollywood twice. And the second time, he pushes against it until he pushes into the other lane in front of oncoming traffic. Then he floors it, crashes through a bus stop, the patio of the bar behind the bus stop, and then through the plate glass window of a bar behind that, pinning 2 patrons to the bar. He then exits the vehicle, picks up a piece of glass, and slashed his own throat with it several times.
So what you're saying is he's doing great.
Yes. People who weren't struck by his car subdued him, and then they kept him from bleeding to death until the ambulance arrives. Now, he survives the incident, but 2 of the people that he struck did not.
Was he on like a bunch of drugs?
No. And that's the thing, is when his lawyer represented him, his excuse was that Red suffers from something called syncope, which is a condition which is defined by like fainting spells.
Oh, well, yeah, that explains it.
Witnesses on the scene, however, 3 of whom were FBI agents who were mere feet from the bar when it was hit, testified that Red was fully conscious and aware while crashing his car through the bar. Several people.
Was he on PCP by any chance?
Apparently, he was not on anything.
Yeah. So this movie does have. He sounds a little bit nihilistic, but this movie has a very, and I think this might account for maybe our different feelings about it. There's something very like dude about this movie. Like this is a guy's movie. Shit's blowing up. Like it's very.
Okay, I'm going to admit, like right up front, that, and I'm going to talk about it as we go through it. In order to really get my mind around this in a way that enjoys it, I have to fill in the blanks with like my own interpretation. And I'm kind of glad it's lazy writing on his part, and it's probably due to his inexperience as well, and just probably not being a very good writer to begin with. But I do appreciate being given that sort of space to kind of fill in the blanks, because there's definitely movies out there that do that deliberately. Like David Lynch is always doing that. Like he definitely has ideas about what he's doing with his movies, but he refuses to to explain himself, and just kind of lets people sort of interpret shit as they will.
I like that. I appreciate when that's done well. I think it's done very well. But I think a lot of times people are like, "Oh, it's ambiguity." And it's like, no, it's not ambiguity. It's bad writing.
Yeah. In this case, it's not a deliberate ambiguity.
Because there are so many question marks in this movie that just do not get addressed. And if they did, they could have been good. Except he doesn't, and so they're just like weird mistakes.
So I can't decide if the problem is that he did have this idea that I'm going to, because the shit that I'm going to explain, I feel like it might have been like a part of the equation that he just didn't express very well.
Are you talking about magical realism? The botched magical realism?
Yeah, because at the end of the movie, all that shit goes out the window. Like he sets something up that feels very...
That's because I don't think it's intentional. I think he starts it on this kind of magical realism, light kind of mysticism, but then doesn't go anywhere with it, and it's never acknowledged in the movie. And so you're just sort of like, is this just a mistake or is this bad? Like, what? I think it's just bad writing.
I've also got a note about that because there's several times throughout this movie that red Cadillac that Jim drives gets fucked up, like trashed in very significant ways. And then it can't just be continuity errors because it's so obvious.
This whole thing screams like they got halfway through and the studio was like, just finish the fucking movie. I don't even care what you give me.
Yeah. So let's talk about the criticism.
All right. So there's a lot of reviews for this, and because interestingly, this was the only movie that came out that week, the only new movie that came out that week, and it still came in at number 8 at the box office.
That's fucked up.
Yeah, and
what
not
was it
even
up against?
Nothing in particular. Nothing like it's not like, oh, it's up against Poltergeist 2 or whatever. Nope, it's just like random shit. I mean, big name stuff, but 86 is kind of a weird year for the theater, it seems. But
it is. It's pretty liminal.
But it gets most of the reviews I was coming across. I grabbed a couple of the big ones just because. But I'm going to hit you with some. So. Let's see. I'll start with this one that's kind of notable. I think a lot of people have picked up on it. This is from the Globe and Mail, which is a Canadian newspaper. It says, it's not too much to imagine that John Ryder is Jim's repressed bisexuality personified. That makes that makes The Hitcher a first feature for both Eric Red and director Robert Harmon, a slasher movie about gay panic, a nasty piece of homophobic angst for the age of AIDS. Also, AIDS has a lowercase s, which I think is weird, but
weird. Is this a contemporary review?
Yeah, these are all contemporary.
Wow. All right.
And you'll start to notice a theme here. And now, given I hit you with Gene. So this is the kind of movie that may satisfy the mentally deficient, but it is more likely to drive away from moviegoing every unsuspecting adult who stumbles into it hoping for a decent thriller or two. What a boost to home video this film is going to be. Joke's on you, Gene Siskel. It didn't even do well there. He quite famously gave this no stars.
No stars, yeah.
All right, now I'm going to hit you with Raj.
Okay. Oh, good God.
On its own terms, the movie is diseased and corrupt. I know. I would have admired it more if it had found the courage to acknowledge the real relationship it was portraying between Howell and Rutger, between Howell and Rutger, which that's a weird way of phrasing it.
Yeah.
But no, it prefers to disguise itself as a violent thriller, and on that level, it is reprehensible. Quite interestingly, he does not actually say... I mean, it's pretty heavily implied, but he does not say what he thinks that relationship is.
No shit.
Because I read all of these in full, and some of these were kind of long. Now, here's the last one. It's a cheap, easy rehash of Spielberg's Duel and The Hitchhiker. Nothing is original, though the core of the movie seems to be a quasi-homosexual mentor-pupil assault. Beyond that, you can express only disgust at a movie that deals with pain and fear in such an empty, squalid way. Now, that is from the LA Times. And I sent you, so that particular, and it'll become clear why I chose these in a second, but that review ran, it was a pretty big review, and I think it got like front page of their like film section or arts section or whatever, and I sent you the 2 pages
you sent me those letters to the editor.
Yeah, and everybody was outraged. I thought what's really interesting about all that outrage, but about like how could you, because the LA Times review, he's not as scathing as a lot of other people. He did try to find some things about it that he thought were okay. I think largely just Rutger Hauer and the way the movie is shot. The score is not bad either.
I completely slept on that. I forgot to look up who did the music.
It's Mark Isham. He's, but it's not much.
It's got a real like Tangerine Dream vibe to it at times. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of I think mid 80s style. But what I sent you was like 10 or 8 or 10 letters to the editor that were just outraged that they would even review this film. And I think what's interesting about that is that none of those people had seen the movie yet. Right,
because some of them point out, they're like, this is disgusting that they would do this in a movie, but they point out stuff that was probably mentioned in articles elsewhere, because these scenes that they reference, like the eyeball in the burger, that's not in the movie. It's a fucking finger.
There is not a lot of violence in this movie.
Yeah.
There's a lot of implied violence.
So implied violence, but there's nothing terribly in your face.
Yeah. And I think part of what people are kind of keying into is that you can get away with, I mean, look at The Exorcist. That movie is aggressive by today's standards.
Oh, yeah.
And you can get away with that if it's there for a reason or if you're really good at what you're doing. And The Exorcist, obviously, Friedkin was a terrible person, but he was a really, really good director. Mm-hmm. And so like everybody else involved in the movie is very, very talented. And so I think a lot of people are willing to overlook that shit. There is nothing particularly good about this movie. There's not a lot of talent here. It's just, it feels sleazy. And
it's a first-time picture for a lot of people involved in the production. Yeah.
And I think there's a ton of mistakes. And I think, so everybody's sort of looking at it like, you made a movie that doesn't really have a lot going for it, except for the fact that it's sleazy.
Yeah.
And so, but obviously the most notable thing about all of those is that I very rarely agree with a lot of these reviews, because this is from an era when it was not in vogue to appreciate horror films. So I usually think they're wrong. And obviously, Roger Ebert, you can go fuck yourself. But I do agree with a lot of these reviews, because what they're all picking up on is like, this movie doesn't have much to it. It's not very interesting. It's not very well written. It's pretty gay, though. And I think it's interesting that these are, as far as I know, all straight men. And they're all picking up on the fact that there is something queer about this movie. So I don't think it's unreasonable for more modern assessments to be like, oh, this is a very gay movie. Now, the thing is, this is not a very gay movie. This is a very homophobic movie. And what I don't like about these, again, the sort of like more recent re-evaluations and assessments of queer reads of movies. So obviously, we all bring our identities and our baggage to the media we consume. And I think however a person reads a movie or experiences a movie is valid, obviously. But my concern with a lot of this stuff is that these sort of these re-examinations, these kind of, and I amateur, for lack of a better word, and I don't mean that in a sort of pejorative way. It's the only word I can kind of grasp right now. They tend to come from a kind of ahistorical position, and so when that happens, what we end up perpetuating are these analyses of things that risk whitewashing the more recent past and sort of ignoring the profound and consequential homophobia that was just rampant throughout this time. So when we look at this and it's like, oh, obviously this is, two gay men, a repressed gay men. It's like, it's not. This movie is a product of an extremely homophobic culture. And what I think Red is doing in this movie is he's wielding homosexuality as a weapon. It's used as a threat in this. If John Ryder is gay, that his sexuality is a very clear threat to Jim and to other people throughout the movie. And I think it's only because of Rutger Hauer's performance that this like awful kind of clumsy homophobia comes across as anything nuanced or interesting.
Now, I maybe I'm just fucking slow, and I'm going to need you to kind of roll it out for me. But is there more of a subtext to this that I missed than just that scene at the job site?
That's the big one. But he plays the character in a way, and that's part of why I find a lot of this a little irritating, and I think sometimes it borders on problematic in the true sense, is that a lot of it is projection. It's people watching a movie and seeing either their own experiences or seeing something of themselves and things. And that's usually what is good about movies. But in this case, it's like you're putting things onto these characters that not only were they not there, but this is like type of thing that queer people would have seen and felt bad about. But I mean, most of the shit people saw in the 80s they would have felt bad about, and the 90s for that matter. Which is why I think a lot of these readings are very new. It's like these are by and large coming from people who did not grow up in this culture. They grew up in one that was a little bit more permissive and a little bit more celebratory, which is a good thing. But it is unfortunate that they don't know much about queer history or queerness in American culture, and so the gravity of stuff like that, I think, is sort of a little bit lost on people a lot of the time. Yeah. So there is there's the scene that we'll talk about it eventually, but I think from the moment he picks him up, there's a lot of implications about the way the way he looks at him. There's, I think, a lot of intimacy. I think Hauer does a lot of he invades his space a lot, and he touches him in a lot of ways they're not aggressive. And I think people are not accustomed to seeing men behave intimately in American cinema in general. And so I think maybe that's partially why it's like, oh, this is somewhat gay, or there's some sort of nascent homosexuality here. And it's like, well, no, he's doing this on purpose to fuck with him. He's kind of trying to throw him off. So if he is the sort of the specter of homosexuality, it is a threat throughout the whole movie. And I think Rutger Hauer is probably smart enough to know, I can use this to my advantage and play this character in a strange way, because he touches him a lot. He's very in his space. He kind of gives him strange looks. And there is a little bit of I don't really know how to describe it, but there is something queer about it. But there's no homosexual read on this. If anything, it's just kind of mean, because it does portray it as something very frightening or threatening. And I mean, I'll point them out when we get to them, but because I did spend some time I'm going to listen to what other people think of this, which is a thing I like to do. And every single one of them, I was like, I think this is not just a wrong read of the movie. I think this is a bad read of the movie. Gotcha. To be like, oh, this is a queer road movie. And it's like, it's not. And it's like, if you knew what sort of people were dealing with in the 80s, and I think the reference to AIDS is it feels a little bit out of left field. I think
that's definitely a little shoehorned in there.
I think it's more just a product of the era, but it speaks to the fact that homosexuality was conflated with AIDS and conflated with death. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's probably why he makes that Globe and Mail review makes that leap of it is definitely a gay panic movie. I think that is true. But was it Eric Red? Is that his name?
Yeah.
I mean, he does not seem like a very he's a nuanced writer. This is all very blunt. And so anything that comes across that way, I think, is very unintentional, which is why it's this is a product of a homophobic culture. This is not a smart writer. And I don't mean that he's not a smart person. I mean he's not a clever writer. He's not doing anything smart or nuance here. He's just sort of, everything feels very clunky and clumsy. So if it comes across that way, it's either because Rutger Hauer is doing something very interesting, or people are seeing kind of what they want to see.
Sure. Yeah. Red's movies are definitely not surgical. He's really more of a sort of his scripts are blunt instruments at best.
Yeah.
I think that works in the right hands, which is why Near Dark is as good as good as it is. I like it a lot. It's one of my favorite vampire movies. Blue Steel is also a pretty good cop movie. It's fucked up and weird, and definitely an Eric Red production, but yeah, it's not fucking subtle. There's no nuance going on.
And so I think that's why we're probably going to have different feelings on this, because I enjoy a lot of dumb garbage. and especially a lot of dumb action movies. I just watched Cyborg recently. Loved it. But like, I can appreciate those movies. But there are some reads of things where it's like, oh, I know exactly who this movie was made for, and it is not me, and it will never be me. And so it's like, there are like, so like straight white guys, they might love it. And I would watch it and be like, I don't know, I'm a little offended by it, but also it just doesn't work on me. And this, I think, is one of them. It's like, this is a movie where somebody had an idea to blow up a bunch of shit and found a way to make a script about it.
Thank God, because those explosions, that pyro is great.
The car chases in this are great. The explosions are great. The story's dumb as shit. It's fucking stupid and terrible. The dialogue in this movie is offensively bad.
Yeah. There is a, here it is. I went while you were talking, I looked up February of 86 in terms of releases that year. Weird month. Let's see. We had, this movie went up, this came out in February 21st. So end of the month. It came out against 9.5 weeks.
Sexy.
Yeah. And that was really the only sort of big release. Pretty in Pink came out a week later.
Yeah, I think Pretty in Pink beat it, which is like...
Yeah. Pretty in Pink did $40 million in box office.
Damn.
So I'd say so. FX came out that
Oh,
month.
God, what a shit month.
I haven't seen that one in a really long
FX
time,
is
but
not
I remember
good.
I remember liking it a lot. The week after that, the Delta Force came out.
Ooh, see, that's one that I would have a hard time with. Maybe not.
You know what? I watched that one not that long ago, and as it leaves me very conflicted because it is racist as hell. Holy shit! But also, fucking awesome action movie. Like, legitimately, pretty fucking great. But yeah, boo. I feel weird about that one for sure.
But I think that's an interesting comparison because a lot of time, I think the way I described it to you, and I was being a little dismissive, but I'm going to say it anyway because I think it might get at what I want to get at. I described it to you as when, like, reading these sort of queer reevaluations, they always sound a lot to me like someone trying to explain to you why it's okay for them to like a movie that other people say they shouldn't like.
Yeah, I get that because I definitely, especially being in the business that we are, where we watch a lot of movies from this era, we have to constantly reckon with the ugliest parts of the decade in which they were made in, because no matter what, there's always, every fucking movie from the era was informed by some kind of fucking terrible ism. And sometimes they don't just stop at one. There's a whole fucking mixed bag of just racism and hatred throughout it. And so it's really fucking hard to sit here and go, yeah, I really enjoyed this movie, when there's all these parts of it that are just like, Jesus, how the fuck do I actually justify this movie to a crowd of people, you know?
But I mean, that's kind of what we're doing, is like, we're, these, rather than me trying to find a way to frame something so it's okay for me to like it, I think a better approach to it is to say, how can I like this when it is still this thing? Like, how can I think Chinatown is one of the greatest movies to come out of the 70s when I know that it's made by a fucking monster?
Yeah.
And it came out of a studio system that I find deplorable and repulsive.
Yeah.
Like, there are better ways, rather than be like, oh no, I think it's actually this. I think we should just fucking confront this stuff head on and say, yeah, these parts of it suck, but these other parts don't suck. And so you kind of have to, like, yeah, it's tricky and sometimes it feels a little gross, but like, hey, that's what creative output and culture really is. Like, it's all of the things all the time. And, nothing is coming from a pure place. So like this, how do we reckon with this? I think that's a much more interesting discussion than, oh no, I think it's actually this, so it's okay for me to like it now.
Yeah, a lot of that sort of cultural criticism has a tendency to sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is something that I'm very, very conscious of, and I try very hard not to. I struggle with that.
Well, that's the thing, though, is actual cultural criticism is not that. Actual cultural criticism is an attempt to engage, for me, a well-informed position. It is not what, like, the academic cultural criticism or intellectual cultural criticism is a very different thing than I think what most people think it is. And it's not what people are doing on Bloody Disgusting or whatever. But I mean, God bless them. They're trying to take a different look at things, and that's great. But real cultural criticism is a tricky thing that tries to engage with things in a very involved and nuanced way. No. Not that we're going to be doing that here, but
we'll do our best.
I spent many years doing that, so I know a thing or two about it. I don't know how much of it I'm going to apply here, but
the movie with all the explosions in it.
Hey, even the explosions are great. They say something about culture too.
Yeah. So let's dive in, shall we?
All right.
So we open on a dark desert highway.
Dead dark is the right word.
Yep. Cool wind in my hair. Warm smell of Colitos rising up through the air.
Well, he's got nothing but his dreams and his imagination to keep him company late at night.
Yeah. Yep. Jim Halsey lights a cigarette, drives a Cadillac alone on a lonely desert road.
Listen, cigarettes play a huge role in this movie.
It is weird. It's almost like is there a code to it? Does it mean something? I keep trying to just zero in on it, but no, I think it's just because everybody smoked in the 80s.
Yeah, probably. But it does seem it comes up more than you'd think, and it always feels very like intentional and explicit.
Yeah. So as he drives, he's passed by a Volkswagen Beetle that just disappears off into the night. So it's late. Jim is tired. He's nodding and struggling to stay awake.
You ever fall asleep? You ever fall asleep while driving?
Yes, I have, and thankfully it was in a really it was in a spot where the sort of risk was very low. When we moved back here from Florida after I was done with school, I decided like we're gonna make this drive in a single stretch. Like we're not gonna fucking stretch it out. We're gonna stop and sleep. We're just gonna fucking go, because I'd done that before very easily. It's like a 27-hour ride, but this time we were coming back. And we got caught up in gridlock in Hartford. And at a certain point, I kind of like...
I bet I know where, too.
I kind of like lifted my head very suddenly and realized that I was not where I was like the last time I was sort of like consciously paying attention. And I think that I had sort of like drifted off and gone to sleep as the car was just like rolling along with traffic. So yeah, very...
I, too, have fallen asleep at the wheel in Connecticut.
No shit. In Hartford?
No. But I was on my way back from Connecticut. It was very, very late at night, and I almost drove off the road. It was actually quite frightening.
I'm sure. Like in my situation, like I think that if I had hit the car in front of me, it would have just like gently nudged their bumper. But just the fact that I fell asleep at the wheel while driving was enough for me to be pretty fucking spooked.
Yeah, I had to sleep in a parking lot for like 3 hours.
Jesus Christ.
I mean, I could have just plowed through a bunch of people into a bar, into 2 bars.
through a bus stop. Yeah. So yeah, he smokes, he drinks coffee, he puts on the radio. It starts to rain. Before long, he can't resist it any longer, and he falls asleep. And he wakes very suddenly when he nearly hits a truck head on. So here's where I'm going to sort of lay out my kind of esoteric vision for like what's actually happening in this movie.
Wait, before you do that, we forgot to sort of mention, because I think it's going to be connected to what you're going to say.
Okay.
We forgot to mention this. Riders on the Storm, I had a similar experience, bullshit aside. I think this is coming from a place of urban legend. And I think that is largely what is informing its sort of mystical undertone that he never follows through on. Mm-hmm. But I also think like, so a lot of the things I listened to that the other kind of takes were like, hitchhiking was really popular in the 80s, to which I say, no, it was not. Hitchhiking was very much not.
I do recall seeing people hitchhiking.
So I just wrote a fairly long thing about hitchhiking murders recently. Hitchhiking really had fallen very much out of favor by the 80s because in the late 70s, there were a lot of very kind of highly publicized stories about people being brutally killed. Mm-hmm. And so it started to get a really negative rap. And then the FBI started releasing like statements to be like, do not do this anymore. It is extremely dangerous. So this practice that had been going on like since the Great Depression, and it was never like a popular thing. It was a thing people did out of necessity, except for in the 60s. That was when people started to do it to travel around, man. And so I think there is a mystical quality that he is drawing on.
Oh, sure.
And that, I think, is really where this story comes from. It's the Hitcher. It's just sort of a lot of urban legends sort of all mixed together. And that is why it seems like this Rutger Hauer character just seems to pop up out of nowhere all the time.
Okay, I can buy that. Did I ever tell you about the time that me and like a couple of friends were hitchhiking to a Slapshot show?
No.
Yeah,
Was it in Boston?
No. It was out in like Amherst. So,
Jesus.
Yeah. But we were driving, and the truck that we were driving kind of broke down, and we were like, well, it'll take a fucking million years for them to like come and get us. We're closer to the show than we are to home. Let's just like fucking walk to the show. And like,
That Slapshot went over real well in Amherst.
They did. It was a really good show, as I recall. Yeah, but anyways, long story short, we get to a point where we're like, this, I don't know how fucking far this is. If we want to get there, we need to like get a ride. So we fucking put a thumb out, and we get picked up. It was me and two other guys, and we get picked up by a dude.
Oh, wait, I do know this story.
Okay, and he says, and we're like, we're going to this place, and he's like, yeah, it's no problem. Well, I'll just take you there the whole way. It's no sweat. We just got to drop by my house first so I can let my dog out.
That's
and we're
no.
like,
nope.
Yeah. And we are never go to a second location.
Nope.
And we immediately we're like, no, you can just let us out right here. It's cool. He's like, no, it's no sweat. Like I just need to stop by to my house, let my dog out. It's all good. And we're like, no. You need to like pull over right now and let us out. And he's like, really? It's no problem. He kept like insisting. And at a certain point, I turned to him, and my friend Chris behind him was about to basically put his arm around his fucking throat from the back seat. And I said, if you don't let us out, we're going to fucking kill you right here in your car. And I don't give a shit if this car crashes. You're going to let us out right now. And he was like, okay, fine. And like, let's like acts like we're the ones being crazy.
Well, he was just trying to help you. I mean,
I know. We just had to let his dog out. I mean, what's the fucking problem?
Fair.
But yeah. But
it speaks to the fear. Hitchhiking, I think, speaks to and the reason it becomes such, I think, a big thing in the 80s, or especially around horror and paranormal stories, is that it speaks to the fear of others that I think was becoming a lot more common in the 80s because Reaganism sort of stokes fear of difference, of people unlike you. And so I think that's really what Red is sort of keying in on, is like, oh, there's this fear, and it is sort of manifest in this stranger that you might pick up on the highway, and that person might want to do something bad to you because you don't know who they are or where they're coming from or where they're going. And I think that's the more interesting thing about the John Ryder character and the things that that Rutger Hauer does.
Yeah. Fear was definitely, it has always been a very central part of sort of like the conservative identity, the Republican.
Oh, I think it's the core of it.
But it really was the Reagan 80s.
Yeah.
That where they started to kind of like, it wasn't so much a face, but the idea that there's a lot of people out there, everybody really, who wants to fucking kill you and take your shit.
Right. They learned how to wield it as a weapon.
Yeah.
This sort of fear. When the reality is like, no, people don't give a shit about you. No one's trying to kill you. Don't worry about it. It's like, I can't go to the gym. Everybody's looking at me. No, they're not. They don't want to kill you, and they're not looking at you at the gym. Everybody's just living their fucking lives, man.
Everybody's just trying to get to fucking Friday, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyways, back to my theory. So
anyway, sorry, I derailed it there for a minute.
Valuable chatter nonetheless. Our villain, we're eventually going to pick up John Ryder, the Rutger Hauer character. And so throughout this movie, he sort of appears and disappears at will, appearing sometimes in really fucking strange places without explanation. And so it is with a very heavy heart that I fall back on the tritest trope of them all right here. I don't think that Jim avoided the truck. In this moment, he crashed into it and died, and he's now some kind of ghost on the highway.
That's a really great Gun Club song.
Fucking great Gun Club
but
song.
Also, I thought about... That's not why... when you said it, I thought of this song. But I think that if they had gone that way, this movie would be infinitely better.
If they had really been more explicit about that, or even intended
But I don't think he's creative enough to do that.
That's the thing, is I don't know if it's... I don't think it's deliberate. I think that I am very much sort of projecting.
You grabbed the most obvious explanation, and even that is too creative for this guy.
Yeah. So Jim recovers from nearly crashing, and up ahead in a very heavy downpour, he spots a hitchhiker and stops to let him in.
And here's where we start projecting.
Yeah. So his name is John Ryder. He's evasive about where he's going.
So the John Ryder character, it's a lot of the queer parts of this, I think, have to do with how Rutger Hauer plays this, and the fact that he is just he is a beautiful man in this movie. He looks very beautiful, and
he's a handsome dude with a very, very striking appearance. Like, it was his destiny to end up in movies.
Yeah.
You know.
So he's soaking wet, and it's the way that he looks at him. I mean, even like to the point, like I think one of the first things he says is like, "I'm getting your car all wet." Like, there's something about their interaction. And C. Thomas Howell is not playing into this. It's all Rutger Hauer. But I think at one point, Jim says, "What are you looking at me like that for?" And Ryder says, "I'm just looking." And there's these there's these very kind of intimate moments where it's like, there's a tension here that's not yet menacing. It's like, that's why it feels sexual, because there is something that's like, he's looking at him in a way that's like, it's not tender. It's
you know what it is the way that he looks at him is almost like, I've got plans for this guy.
Yes.
Because he's sort of looking at him out of the corner of his eye, and his mouth is kind of open.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's just staring.
And so there is, I don't really know how to describe it, but like, when you are trying to determine where someone is at in terms of orientation, and you're sort of like, what do I say? Do I be explicit? Do I not be explicit? These exchanges happen a lot. And you're just sort of like, I don't want to come right out and be like, I think you're attractive and want to have sex with you. So you sort of have to do this weird dance where it's like, I'm just looking at you, that's all. And it's like, it's like a weird back and forth. And I think that's why a lot of queer viewers are picking up on this like strange tension. Now, I think Rutger Hauer knows what he's doing in this moment. He's using this as a sort of way of throwing this other character off. And I think it works. It works very well. And he does it throughout. Like, he'll wave a handkerchief or something, and he just does these like mannerisms throughout the whole movie where it's like, you recognize it. But the fact is, Rutger Hauer's doing that on purpose. He's an actor doing this on purpose. Eric Red wrote this really clunky, homophobic dialogue, and I'm guessing the direction probably isn't even there. I think he's just taking a lot of liberty. And so I don't think it's fair to be like, oh, this is a queer horror movie. It is not. I think it's like, oh, it just has a very good actor in it who's trying to do the best with this shit script. And I think he plays it in a very smart way that works, because you could be a lot more offensive and he's not. Mm-hmm. But this is, I think, this first meeting in the car is really what I think cements it for people like, oh, these are queer characters. I don't know that they are, but I can see why people think they are, because the next thing he does is he grabs his leg.
Yeah. So in this scene, we learn that Jim is not the owner of this car. He's doing something called a drive-away, which is basically...
I had to look that up because I was like, why are they talking about it like it's a normal thing? It's a thing that still exists.
Yeah. It's like in Vanishing Point. That's what Kowalski is doing. He's delivering...
Yeah, but Vanishing Point's even older than this.
This is true. Yeah. But yeah, I would imagine that, like, that's how you get your car across the country, like if you don't want to drive it yourself.
I guess. I mean, it never occurred to me because, like, I'm just sort of like, well, I would have to drive it myself if I had a car. Like,
Yeah. So, yeah, up ahead a little way in the distance, the two approach the Volkswagen that we saw previously, pulled over on the side of the road. When Jim kind of slows to take a look at it, John grabs his leg very suddenly and presses down on the gas to speed by it. Jim is suitably spooked by this. He pulls over, tells John to get out, but he does not.
And this, I think, this continues that, because he's very evasive. Jim keeps asking, where are you going? Where can I take you? And he never answers. He just kind of keeps asking other questions or saying weird shit. What I wonder about this scene is like, so first of all, he presumably pushes his leg down to make the car go faster, but he also grabs his leg. So he's not just pushing, he's grabbing it as well.
Yeah.
But also, why would he ask a stranger what's wrong with the car? He picked him up quite a ways back. So presumably he would not know what's wrong with this car that they have just now passed.
True. Also, he says some things like, I thought I saw something, but like we didn't see it. So like, what the fuck did he see?
It's also pitch black. Like,
yeah,
you didn't see anything.
And I would imagine, like, I could sort of see through some sort of, like, logical gymnastics, like, how he would kind of come to this sort of, what's wrong with this car? Because obviously this guy wanted me to speed past it. So, like, there's that. But, like, it takes a lot of fucking thinking.
And but again, that's that thing is, like, he's not a good writer. And so all of this is just sort of unfulfilled. Everything about this movie is an unfulfilled promise. So, like, you know, that could have been a thing. He could have used it. Like, it's there. He's halfway there. He's just not good enough to get the rest of the way.
Yeah, that's really kind of that is really the problem, is because at a certain point, this movie is going to completely abandon any sort of that kind of magical realism that I keep like hanging on to. There's going to come a time when I can no longer rely on it, and it drives me fucking nuts because I like where that is going, even if it's just me coming up with it. And the fact that the movie no longer provides me with material to sort of project upon makes me nuts.
Yeah, your wild speculation is already more satisfying than the entire movie.
Yeah. So Jim asks him about the car back there. John implies that it's his and that he's out of gas. But then they drive along and he quickly forgets about that, starts to menace Jim as they drive.
But he also keeps asking him for cigarettes, like just asking weird questions.
Yeah. And then, he tells him that the car was not his, actually, and that he was in the car before Jim picked him up.
This dialogue is so bad.
And then he confesses to Jim that he killed the driver and dismembered his body, and he intends to kill Jim, too. Yeah. So now there's this moment of tension when they approach a job site on the road, but not much happens here. Ryder sort of suggestively grabs Jim's leg when the site foreman chats them up.
He grabs his crotch.
Basically, yeah. And he's kind of like, I think he's doing it just so that this guy will see it and will fuck off and leave him alone.
This is another interesting point, because he is again exploiting homophobia, because this guy, because presumably, and I think this is maybe where I was unduly slanderous of C. Thomas Howell, because clearly there's something is happening in this car that is not right. And any normal person, I think it's really weird that the guy, he's like a flagger on a highway. He comes up to the car. He's just like, hey, how's it going?
Got a cigarette?
He's like, why? Again, yes. And he asks him for a fucking cigarette. But like, why is he just randomly be like, yeah, we're just two dudes chatting, got nothing else to do? Like, no, get the fuck away from the car. But the point is, you would look at that and say, something's not right here, and ask if everything was okay.
Right.
He doesn't do that because he notices that John Ryder has his hand on his crotch. You know, he has a knife in his hand and he can't see that, which again, even that speaks to the sort of emasculation thing. But like the guy is unwilling to intervene because it's two men that he thinks are two gay men. So it's like, again, this is not a queer thing that's happening here. This is homophobia at work, and he knows that, and he's using that to their advantage in this scene. And this dialogue sucks.
Yeah, it is a little weird, because it is like, hey, where are you from? Where are you going? Like, you would not have this conversation.
No, this whole movie is one contrivance after another. Like, it is just like, I don't know how we got there. Let's figure out how to jam these people together.
Yeah. So once they're clear of the site, Ryder produces a switchblade and menaces Jim with it, announcing that he wants Jim to stop him from hurting him. And he tells him that Jim needs to tell him that he wants to die. And this is kind of this is a very condensed description of what happens. This scene goes for quite a while, and it's very, very tight shots of Howell's face with like the knife pressed into it, like right under his eye and shit. And I think Howell is selling the fuck out of
Yeah, because as far as I know, he did not know that he was going to do that.
Jesus Christ.
Hey, look, you cannot hold down a Dutch man.
No, they're wily.
Yep, the Dutch gonna do what the Dutch gonna do.
Yeah. So back to my kind of haunted highway theme. My personal belief here is that Ryder is a sort of psychopomp of a sort, which is
psychopomp.
Which is a spirit from Greek myth which guides the dead to the afterlife. And so depictions of Charon, the ferryman of the River Styx, are often horrific at worst and unpleasant at best. And it's in these stories.
Do they ever say anything about sexy in Dutch?
Nope. Nope. Greek, though. I mean, I don't know where that falls.
Well, they're not the same, but
A little bit of a distance. But in these stories, the thing is that the dead must go willingly and knowingly to Hades, or they haunt the shores of the Styx until they're ready to go. And in this case, Jim doesn't realize that he's dead, so he's just going to resist, and it's going to have terrible consequences.
okay. What you're describing is Carnival of Souls.
Yes.
I think
Yes, I am.
recently was listening to something completely unrelated to horror movies, and it was a kind of a discussion about the new Taylor Swift album, and one of the people that was talking about it was like, this album reminds me of lots of other albums, and I want to go listen to those. And I thought, my God, that is one of the shadiest things you could say about anything. Like, your movie makes me want to go watch other things, and that is what this is. Like, you just keep reminding me of better movies, and I'd like to go watch those instead.
Oh, well, Jesus Christ. I'm sorry I made you watch the fucking Hitcher.
No, it was an interesting experience. I just think it's a boring movie, but it's
I will say
interesting
this.
to see a movie that was so badly written actually get made.
It's the sort of thing where it's like...
Not by Full Moon.
Maybe I could make a movie.
This guy can do it.
Yeah. So as all this is happening, Jim sees that the door is not fully closed, and because it's the 80s, nobody's wearing a seatbelt. So he suddenly literally kicks Ryder out the door while they're driving along, and he just spins and cartwheels across the highway as Jim sort of drives away triumphantly. Sometime later, Ryder regains consciousness on the highway, and we get a really this is one of my favorite shots in the whole fucking movie, where the camera sort of dollies up on him from a really low angle suddenly. It shoots him against this sort of gray sky from below. It's a really awesome shot.
I mean, again, the cinematography in this is pretty good.
It is.
And because the landscape is really desolate, it feels very Australian to me.
I had the same thought. Again, it was like
Because
that.
again, Road Games is a better movie.
This is like, what is it? Carnival of Souls, Road Games, and what is Dust Devil?
Yep.
Movies that we could be watching.
Hell,
otherwise.
I'll throw Joyride in there. That's better than this too.
And you know what? Fuck it. Let's just put Mad Max in there.
Well, the guy who, the cinematographer, I think made Mad Max, or shot Mad Max.
Jesus, that explains a lot, because there are a lot of those George Miller low angle, high speed cars driving along the highway shots.
He definitely shot Fury Road. I know that.
Yeah. So, later that day, Jim is passed on the highway by a family in a station wagon. The kids in the way back shoot at him with toy guns. And then a passenger obscured by a stuffed animal pulls it aside to reveal that it is Ryder in the way back with the kids.
So playful.
So playful. With the kids, which causes Jim to panic. He pulls up alongside of them, honking his horn, trying to get them to pull over. Now, once again, not paying attention to oncoming traffic, Jim clips a bus in the oncoming lane, spirals to the side of the road.
Now, the weird thing about this scene is that they cut to Ryder in the back again, and he kisses the little girl on the forehead. Now, my question is, nobody else can see him. Jim can't see him because he's already past the truck. The adults in the front are driving. So for whose benefit is that?
You know what? He's a madman. He's wild.
Okay, I guess.
Yeah, when he recovers, he finds a station wagon some distance up the road, pulled aside. He looks inside, and while we don't see what he sees, blood drips from the car onto his shoe, and he retreats back to his car in terror.
I needed more than that.
I know.
I mean, I don't need to see it and this is another moment where people are like, oh, it's the John Ryder and the annihilation of the white American family. And I'm like, oh, for God's sake. But I don't need to see children being killed. I mean, I'm not precious about children, but at the same time, give me something.
Give me a bloody hand or something.
All the fucking outrage about this movie and people being like, this is deplorable. How dare you, sir? It's like, they don't show you anything in this movie.
No, you get a little blood, and that's about it. I think the sort of goriest, most explicit moment is really right at the very end. I can't really think of anything else that's That's too graphic.
Like,
Maybe,
I don't
just
need Cannibal Holocaust, but something.
No, you know what this is when you used to look up movies in the sort of like the TV guide or like the HBO guide or whatever, it would say like rated R for sexual imagery, graphic violence, or
sexual situations.
And suggestive themes. I think I think people were really
suggestive
sort of
themes means gay.
Usually it meant there's adult themes. There's stuff that's just not appropriate for children in this movie.
Yeah, there's like taxes. There's a lot of people like arranging their schedule. They got doctor's appointments.
God, it's so suggestive.
Yeah.
It's so horrifying.
Suggestive of a life of mundanity.
Oh, no. Yep. So looking for a phone, he finds an abandoned gas station in the middle of a spooky dust storm. And this is another part of the whole, like, is Jim dead sort of thing. Like, this is a fucking dust storm. Like dust bowl shit.
Again, you really have to question, why are there no other people anywhere in this movie? Even when he gets to restaurants or businesses, there's still no people there. You have to acknowledge it in some way. Otherwise, it just feels like bad filmmaking. And that's what all of this is. Like, you have just explained it in a way that makes sense. It's fine. Keep going. He doesn't even do that. So you're like, why are there no people in this?
No, and usually if this is what you're going to do with your movie, you do have to drop a fucking crumb somewhere.
Because we have to know that you're doing that. Otherwise, it just feels sloppy.
Yeah, otherwise it's just me out here going, this is what I think. And everybody going, yeah, I mean, I guess so.
Be like, I don't know. It makes more sense than the shit we got from them, so sure.
Yeah. So he wanders around the dusty garage until he's mysteriously confronted by Ryder, who says nothing but tosses his keys to him and leaves. Now, Jim sees him get picked up by a pickup truck as he leaves the garage. Later, while driving alone on the highway, Jim is suddenly rear-ended by Ryder driving the pickup truck that we just saw him leave in. And again, like everything else, like we see Jim like alone on the highway, not a pickup truck to be seen anywhere. And suddenly he's just like smashing into the back of his truck. So he terrorizes Jim some more before just driving off the road, disappearing into the desert.
And again, this works because that happens in real life. If you're out driving and there's nowhere I've ever driven around here where you're ever alone. But if you're out somewhere driving in a sort of isolated place alone, and all of a sudden you see a car come up behind you, one of your first thoughts is, what if it's a bad person?
I've been like driving that route from like Florida to here. There are some stretches in the South that are like that where they'll tell you it'll be like next gas station is like 85 miles, and that's like the only fucking thing you're going to see for the next 85
but
miles.
But even we grew up in New Hampshire. When you're a kid in New Hampshire, there's nothing to do, so you drive around a lot. You spend a lot of your time driving around with your dumbass friends or whatever. And if you're alone and you're 17 years old and you're out driving around some back roads and fucking God knows where, you see another car and it's like, I know this person probably is not going to hurt me, but there is a potential that they could.
Yeah, let me tell you a story. So
I bet I've already heard it.
You might have already heard this one, but maybe not. I'm not sure if I ever told you this one. Did I ever tell you about the time when we went down to Lowell to see a show and we were very aggressively cut off by a pickup truck. It was in the middle of the night on the way home, getting on the sort of the ramp to the highway. This truck like just jams in front of me, nearly hits me, and I hit the horn. And this guy followed us all the way home. And he drove, he would get in front of us and slow way down to a point where like he was just like right in front of our bumper. And then he would like pull off and ride really close to us on the side.
Yeah, that's happened to me twice.
Yeah. And then at another point, he got off one exit and then just drove across and got back on the highway, like flying the fuck down there. We got to a spot where I was like, okay, when we get home, like run into the house and lock the door and call the cops because I'll fucking buy you some time. Like this was like crazy shit. I couldn't fucking believe it. It was like the scariest shit in the world.
Now, as an adult, that person's not going to do anything. They're just being a fucking jerk off about it. But if you're out alone,
honestly, I could not be certain. Like the way that this person behaved in this gigantic vehicle, it was like fucking Duel for real, you know?
Oh, you mean the Hitcher? It's the same movie. Same movie. Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing. Is like
road games.
We grew up in the Reagan 80s where you are taught that people want to hurt you, to be afraid. I mean, that was the message of fucking every television show. It's like, that is what the very special episodes were, is that people are dangerous. And so, there is something about this idea that like, being out by yourself and then all of a sudden something materializes and your first thought is this is dangerous. So I think it is interesting that like this movie really is a serious product of its era.
For sure, yeah. So now, Jim later stops at a gas station looking for a phone again, but again finds the place abandoned. A rider, again in the black pickup truck, suddenly bursts through the garage from out of nowhere, crashing through the gas pumps. And I love it because it's so very obviously a stunt driver.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so, he goes through the pumps and a gas spraying everywhere.
He has a wide array of vehicles that he just seems to occupy.
It's that pickup truck, which is a pretty badass pickup. I won't lie.
Yeah, to quote Alison Leiby in the ruined episode of Leprechaun, he really just loves to get around.
Yep. So now Ryder stops at a distance. He lights a match, dropping it on the gas, setting the place on fire. And Jim barely escapes in a literally flaming Cadillac.
Yeah, it's actually pretty great, but
it's a fucking cool shot.
I mean, this is really the Stallonification of cinema. Like this feels very big action movie.
This is
where
much,
it starts to take a turn.
This is the gas station exploding in First Blood. Like
Yeah.
It doesn't just go up like
that was actually what I was thinking of.
yeah. Like you see like barrels go flying. It's almost like the way that the truck stop in Maximum Overdrive just kind of shatters and goes skyward.
I mean,
that's a great effect.
This movie is 2 steps above Maximum Overdrive. Maximum Overdrive is just a movie where they just give into their basest desires and instincts as like 80s people. This is just a little bit more thoughtful than that.
Yeah. So here's a little bit of a further commentary on my sort of Jim's dead thesis, and you can chalk this up to continuity errors. I mentioned this before, but after like hitting the truck or hitting the bus earlier, like the car was fucked up after that accident. It's fine when it goes into the scene, and we're gonna see it like one more time as he exits it, and it is in pristine condition, though maybe a little dusty, even though we just saw it burning like Ghost Rider.
Yeah, it is in flames for quite a while, like to the point where I was like, pretty sure that car would have blown up by now.
yeah. But yeah, like again, this could just be carelessness, but or something is very.
It is 100% continuity errors. There is nothing more going on here, but you're trying to explain it, and for that I thank you.
So now we see a young woman exit a bus outside a diner in the middle of the desert, and she lets herself in, and she unlocks the doors and gets the place up for business.
I love that Jennifer Jason Leigh's character travels by coach bus everywhere. Like that's the only way to get.
It's
that
the
must
only
be
way
expensive.
to get around. Oh, I know. Yeah. So Jim is outside the window trying to get in so he can call the cops, and he does. She lets him in, and they tell him to stay there, which he does. It takes a minute to clean himself up because he's covered in gas.
Yep.
Now, Nash, the young lady, makes Jim a burger.
She has the most 80s outfit I've ever seen.
And her hair is also quite 80s.
Yeah.
As well.
So one of the podcasts I was listening to was like, oh, she's not dressed like a typical 80s woman. And I was like, yes, she is.
Yes, she is.
Now, what they were implying is that she's dressed kind of masculinely. And I was like, no, she's dressed very much like an 80s woman.
What were they expecting? Like fucking hyper color and shit?
Phoebe Cates from Fast Times?
Yeah, I suppose. No. So, yeah.
When Nash is talking about like why she works there or whatever, she's like, oh, my cousin owns the place and my uncle and whatever. She's like, we're all kind of interrelated. And I was like, no, you're actually related. That's what you just said.
Yeah. So yeah, Jim continues to eat, and when she goes back out back to deal with kitchen stuff,
those fries look disgusting.
They look like they're
all like chunky and dense and gross.
They're steak fries.
Oh God, Get the fuck out of here with steak fries.
You don't like a steak fry? I
No.
I could deal with a steak fry. What do you a curly fry?
I like a shoestring fry. I do like a curly fry. I like a waffle fry.
I hate a waffle fry.
You don't get
man.
enough waffle fries.
Don't care for them. I think you get a waffle fries at Arby's.
Oh, God, I love Arby's.
I'm so hungry. I can eat at Arby's.
I can eat at Arby's. Oh.
Yeah. So, he continues to eat when she goes away, and then eventually, like, he's just sort of like blindly putting fries into his mouth, and he picks up a severed finger.
Yeah, this is a real scary stories to tell in the dark moment he has here. Because,
He was eating the French fries, and then it was a finger.
First of all, when did John Ryder have enough time to sneak in there to stick a finger in there?
I did note that like there was a moment where he goes into the bathroom to clean himself up, and she's shown sort of like cooking the meal, and then at a certain point, it's like they put this scene in there of her like walking out back to be like, and now John Ryder got in there and put a finger in the food
like a wraith. He's also a real scamp, that John Ryder. But wouldn't you notice that if you picked up something, you were eating French fries, and all of a sudden you picked up a finger? I think you would immediately notice that does not feel like a French
He's
fry.
really spaced out in this moment, and that's like also to the point where she was like, and then we're from Mars, and we put our spaceship out back.
God, this movie is so stupid.
Yeah, so originally in the script it was supposed to be an eyeball.
Which is even dumber.
Which is super dumb, yeah, but whatever. Revolted, Jim rushes outside just in time for the cops to show up.
And man, they are coming in hot.
So hot. Yep.
And he's not even black.
Oh, shit. He tries to tell them that Ryder is inside, but they won't listen. They just arrest him. Now, the cop in denim is an actor named Gene Davis. He plays the blonde transvestite prostitute in Gruesing. We're going to see a lot of him, like a lot of him, next week when we do 10 to midnight on 99 Cent Rental. Like all of him. His entire naked body.
Okay.
So get ready for that. Yep.
All right.
Yep. Can't get away from this guy. The cops search Jim, somehow find Ryder's bloody knife on his person. How it got there,
Again,
who knows?
It's the same as the finger. How did this get there?
Yep.
It just, you had to do one thing. You just had to do one. You just had to acknowledge it. This whole movie could be so much better if you just acknowledge it.
Yep. Yep. It's magic.
I don't know about so much better, but a little bit better.
So yeah, we're out here in a weird liminal space where Jim Halsey is running from the physical manifestation of the Grim Reaper, if you're following my interpretation.
Or his bisexuality, if you're following the LA Times.
Yep. So Nash comes outside, hassles the cops, tell her that everyone is looking for Jim as the main suspect. For the murders
And again, so Nash reminds me of Amy in Fright Night, where it's like you and Amy in Fright Night makes a little bit more sense, but it's like you have jammed this character in here for reasons, I guess.
I guarantee you that in earlier, it's just kind of like in the conclusion that we came to with Fright Night. I bet you anything that she is not a character in earlier versions of the script.
And
like
because I'm sure a bunch of people read this and they were like, "This feels a little gay. If you put a woman in this," and he was like, "I guess so." Shoehorn.
Yeah.
Because nothing she does throughout this entire movie makes any sense. There's no rationale behind any of it. It is so illogical.
Actually, now that I think of it, there was a girl called Gal in the earlier versions of the script. So yeah, but anyways, yeah, it's she's basically there to set up the movie's kind of major set piece toward the end. Really, is what she's there for. As for anything else, she's fucking wallpaper. She's just kind of there.
And nothing everything she does is so irrational that you're like, this seems stupid. Why is she here?
Yeah.
And I guarantee, I mean, the reason was probably that people were like, this is a little queer, don't you think?
Yeah. So the cops interrogate Jim. And it turns out that he's missing his ID.
Also, they start that scene from the back. They shoot him from the back of his head. Yeah. And they just sort of linger, so they cut away from, it's a sort of like real hard cut from the arrest scene to the police station. And then all of a sudden, it's just the back of his head, and they linger on it for like a good 30 seconds.
Yeah. So, yep. The car has no papers. He can't remember the name of the guy he's delivering the car to. They call the company that arranged the delivery, but nobody answers. They call his brother, who also doesn't answer. The cops lock Jim up in the jail. He finally gets a little sleep. The wall graffiti says, "Feeling good." Feeling fine. Oh, that's a relief.
Oh, God.
Yep. Sometime later, Jim wakes up, finds the place strangely quiet, except for the ringing telephone that nobody answers.
Doesn't this moment feels real Stephen King-y?
Yes, it does, for sure. Yeah. The door to the cell just opens up. The police dog seems to be the only living being in the building, and this is confirmed when Jim goes out to the office and finds everyone in the station dead.
Which, again, wouldn't... assuming John Ryder came in and murdered them all, which, again, I find hard to believe, wouldn't he have heard that? Because these people are, like, savaged.
Oh, yeah, they're fucked up. But, yeah, again, man, he's the Grim Reaper. Or a ghost.
Also, C. Thomas Howell has real gross kid beard at this point. You know what I'm talking about? Like, where he's got, like, just a little bit of, like, stubble on the front. It's like, oh, man, that's so gross.
Yep. We used to call it a C-stash.
Oh, that's right.
Yep. So Jim lifts the gun off of one of the dead cops, takes off into the desert behind the station.
Wait, did you say the dog? Did you say the part about the dog?
Oh, the dog's licking one of the dudes.
Yeah,
like,
that's what makes it real Stephen King-y, where I'm like, this is the most juvenile bullshit I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's like licking the dead neck wound.
Like, why would a dog be doing that? But also, you just wanted an excuse for sound design.
Yeah.
Because it is a real, like, upsetting noise.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Any kind of wet mouth noises are going to fuck with it. We're going to fuck with most people. Jim lifts the gun off the dead cops, takes off into the desert behind the station as backups arrive, and he walks through the desert, eventually finding a market by the side of the road with a phone.
Now, your explanation of this movie, your theory about everything that's happening in this, is way more efficient at explaining everything than any other presumption we might have. Because we're to believe that this, like, homeless drifter has orchestrated all of this mayhem.
Oh, sure.
Successfully.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, that's the only way to me that this movie makes any sense, is if he is not a person, but really more of a force of nature or something, because otherwise it's just a fucking bad movie,
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
There's so much to it that I enjoy, that I'm definitely up for making the effort to sort of fill in the gaps.
But look how much work you had to do to make this not a bad movie.
You know what? I don't mind. I certainly am not going to come back to this movie anytime soon.
It's the same reason why people are like, it's a masterpiece of queer horror. No, it's not. You're just trying to make it through.
Yep. So he tries to make a call at this diner. More police show up. He jumps out, holds them hostage,
and he at this point he is hysterical.
Oh yeah, he's out of his fucking.
He's
mind,
like a raving lunatic.
Yep, and he's greasy.
Oh, he is.
So, my God, you're greasy.
Oh my God, you're greasy.
Yep. So now Jim has the cops reach out, get the captain on the radio so he can plead his case. He talks to the captain, who says he'll give him a fair shake if he surrenders, which he agrees to. But seconds later, Ryder bursts on the highway in the pickup truck, pulls up alongside of them. And he shoots both the cops and vanishes back into the desert just as mysteriously as he arrived.
Oh, I see where you're getting your Sharon thing. It's coming up.
Yeah. So Jim...
it's in my notes. That's why I just exploded that way.
So Jim then collapses in the desert, overcome by madness, puts the gun under his chin, makes like he's going to kill himself.
Girl, it has been 20 minutes. Like, just come up with a better solution.
Which, if we're playing by my rules, this might be Ryder's play the whole time. Is he's got to get Jim to surrender to death. However long ago that was at this point, who fucking knows? But he doesn't do it. He gets up and walks more, eventually coming to a motel and a diner in the desert. And so he takes up in a booth at the back of the diner and is soon joined by Ryder.
Now, this moment is also very, very intimate.
Yes.
Because he's touching his face. He's like and almost caressing his face.
He does that thing where Jim puts the gun out, pulls that gun on him, and he holds it under the table. And he does a thing where he takes his finger. Ryder takes his finger, kind of puts it at the end of the barrel of the gun, and he's like, "Go ahead and shoot me." Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which is then when he grabs his face and he's like caressing him a little bit. He's very, very close to him in a way that under other circumstances would appear romantic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's weird. Anytime you grab someone, it's weirdly controlling, but it would appear that way. And then he licks pennies and puts them on his eyes.
Yes. Okay. So let me get there. But Jim asks him why he's doing this. And he replies by placing coins over Jim's eyes, which is what people used to do to pay Charon to get their loved ones across a river, implying that he's really trying to help Jim get to the afterlife. And so in these stories of
he's killing a lot of people in order to make that happen.
Death is really leaving a body count behind. But in these old stories, when the dead refuse to die, the outcome of their refusal to move on is typically mayhem and more death.
Yeah, it's Final Destination.
Yes. And so haunting the living world causes all kinds of terrible outcomes is kind of where I'm going with this.
You've already written a better movie.
We should make this movie. Ryder gives Jim the bullets for the gun, then he excuses himself. And a bus pulls up.
Because Jim, you forgot to say, Jim does try to shoot him.
Oh, that's right, because he hits his hand on the table, which sets Jim off, and he pulls the gun, of course, doesn't.
But it is it is sort of a mean moment, though. Like, he is mocking him in a strange way, and I think that kind of undermines your theory a little bit.
Yeah, because like even in these sort of old sort of Greek myths, like he's not menacing, he's not terrorizing. It's just like, come on, you got to come with me. And they're like, why? I'm not dead. That's usually the way that those stories go. But it wouldn't be much of a fucking tense suspense movie.
But he otherwise does not delight much in this in a way that, like, I mean, this is 86, so there was not as much known about like serial murderers as we know now. But like, there's not a lot of taunting. There's menacing. But there's not a lot of like, he's not delighting in what he's doing. There are moments where he seems like he is. Like he's having a good time.
It does sort of seem like this is a job that he's doing, to me at least, which sort of informs my ongoing theory here. But I will say this, even though the movie is not really good, these moments where it's the two of them together in these tight scenes, I do think that they are pretty suspenseful.
Right, because Rutger Hauer's a great actor.
Yeah, he's carrying the whole fucking thing.
And he's playing off of someone who at least knows how to react to him.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, I don't think he's doing much else, but he's doing enough to get us through.
Yeah. So Ryder gives Jim the bullets for the gun, and then he excuses himself.
Yeah, meanwhile, Jennifer Jason Leigh shows up on yet another coach bus.
A bus pulls up, everybody gets off, Jim gets on, hides in the bathroom. He loads the gun, the bus drives off with Ryder's pickup truck not far behind him. And then for some reason, Nash is on this bus. And he ambushes her on the way into the restroom where he pleads his case to her. They drive some more on the bus until cops pull it over and Jim surrenders himself.
And he keeps, this is where the cop starts saying, "You spit on my wrist."
Yes. Okay.
And it's like, what does that mean? Like,
Well,
I know what he's trying to get him to do, but why does he keep saying that?
Because he wants to, he's setting him up so he can kill him.
I guess.
Yeah. So
everybody is at an 11 in this movie.
Which is crazy because this is the captain that he just spoke to who was like, if you give yourself up.
Yeah, this is Jeffrey DeMunn, right?
Yeah, Jeffrey DeMunn playing a fucking sheriff again. Like a couple of years later, he's going to be a sheriff in the Blob.
He has got one speed.
You know what? He does it well, though. He's kind of like Giancarlo Esposito, who just like has one character, but he's really good at it, so it fucking rules.
Yeah, and that one speed is Stephen King movies.
Yeah. So the captain is about to shoot Jim, like we said. He's sort of setting him up to like make it look like he made a move towards him and he was defending himself. That's the whole fucking thing.
And then what happens?
Nash stops them by firing the gun that Jim tossed out.
4 seconds prior, he has a gun in her face, threatening her. She does not know him. Just met him earlier that day, and now she is pointing a gun at the police on his behalf.
Fastest case of Stockholm syndrome in the world.
Listen, sometimes you just got to get that heteronormativity in there. You don't have a lot of time. Just get it in there.
Squeeze it in there with everything you got.
I don't know. He seems real gay. That other guy was just touching his face. What can we do? I don't know. We had that lady in it before. What if she's on another coach bus and she gets off the bus and wants to join him?
Yep.
Good enough.
Together, Nash and Jim take the captain's car and race away while Ryder watches them from the pickup truck some distance away. Now, police start chasing them, and Nash tries to tell them over the radio.
This whole scene is insane.
Crazy shit, and I love it. Nash tries to tell them.
Oh, wait, before she even does that, before they go away, he's like, why are you doing the Jeffrey DeMont is like, why are you doing this? And she goes, when the truth comes down, I'll be just fine. No, ma'am, you will not. What you're doing is still very illegal.
There will be criminal charges.
I mean, frontier justice or no, this is still not okay.
Yep. So the police start chasing them. Nash is trying to tell them over the radio that they're turning themselves in, but the cops just attack. And now this is a fucking awesome car chase. And it looks like they're about to shoot. So, like, there's two police cars, and both of them have, like, cops, like, out the window with shotguns, just wrecking this fucking car that they're driving. It's like Murtaugh's station wagon. And so, at a certain point, the cars pull up beside them, and they're about to shoot out the tires when, like, Jim slams on the brakes, and the cops shoot each other's tires out, and the cars fly through the air.
Yeah, we are in Stallone territory at this point.
It is crazy. They flip over like fucking 8 times and are just wrecked. And so that's pretty awesome. But they drive on in their fucked up police car, and then things get even worse. It's like something out of GTA where their like wanted level is raised, and now there's a fucking police helicopter chasing them.
When that happens, obviously what you do is you go hide in a tunnel until your stars go down. But
yeah, that's right.
Jim doesn't do that.
Nope. Or you go and get your car painted. So the gunner in the copter shoots at them. It looks like they're truly fucked. But here comes Ryder driving in the pickup
out of nowhere.
Manages to casually shoot the helicopter down with a pistol, sending it crashing to the ground below.
And without even looking.
He's just that good. He's just that good. It just sends this thing crashing to the ground below on top of the rest of the police cars that are in pursuit. And then he vanishes back into the desert. So with the police car totally trashed, they leave it on the roadside, walk into the desert beside a truck stop toward a truck stop in the distance.
He's like a sexy Dutch wraith.
Just in and out. He's going to get you, and then he's gone.
And so this scene is where they're sort of like, they're at the truck stop or wherever. This is where she asks him, why did you pick him up?
Yeah, and he's like, I needed somebody to fucking keep me awake.
And so this is another moment that you could interpret in a different way in terms of her being like, why did you let a man into your car? And because the thing she says after that is, can I sit next to you? And so there's sort of implication of like, this kind of heteronormativity can sort of undo all the things he's set in motion with this curiosity, I guess. Because at this point, again, what I think a lot of the critics are picking up on is, yes, because I think Rutger Hauer is playing it in this sort of, I guess, sexually ambiguous way.
Yeah.
Because he is using it as a sort of threat. But we're starting to reach the point where Jim is also becoming obsessed with him.
Yeah.
And
which
so
I think, honestly, narratively kind of makes sense.
Oh, I don't think it makes sense at all. Like,
I think it does. I mean, it's a very common characteristic of a lot of horror movies, where like eventually, like there is a sort of obsession that kind of comes with the fear. We've seen it in other movies.
And so, like, you're getting that thing of like they're both becoming really fixated on one another. It's what's the
right? Because I would also say that like Howell's performance in this is pretty like asexual. Like
He is definitely, so they shoehorn this character of Nash in, but he's not, and I think the reason he doesn't come across as particularly interested in her is because she's an afterthought. So she doesn't fit into the narrative arc of the story, but he is also, what you really have is that Jerry Dandridge, Charlie relationship from Fright Night, where it's like, an older man and a younger man who are obsessed with each other. And so given the time that it comes out, I mean, even now, I think it's not unreasonable to be like, this is a little bit strange, especially when he is presented with this young woman who's very attractive in front of him. And so I can see why they would take that leap. And so that's why I like when she sort of confronts him with like, why did you pick this person up? Why did you set this in motion? Why did you let this man into your car? What were you doing? There's an implication in her question. I don't think Eric Red is smart enough to have done that, because I think that could be a very interesting movie. It's just not this movie.
Yeah. This movie is basically a million missed opportunities.
Yeah, it really is. And so that's why I think it's a little bit interesting, because that is a moment where there's like a bit of shame in like, oh, this is all my fault because I was curious in this way. And so I think that's a lot of what those critics are picking up on, of like, there's a thread of bisexuality or of like sexual curiosity in this. And I think it really starts to kind of, it gets a little bit more clear here with this idea of like, you did this. You stopped to pick this man up because you wanted something. You wanted to know something. And now look what you've done.
Yeah.
And now, again, just like everything else, it is unfulfilled. But I do think there is something there. I just don't think it's an intentional thing.
Right. So Jim then takes a shower, leaving Ash by herself for a bit. She calls her father, then goes to sleep. The camera pans over to reveal that Ryder is right there, mysteriously in the room with her. Then he gets into bed with her, but she doesn't realize it's him until it's too late.
Now, look. She really doesn't realize that sweaty, gross Rutger Hauer is not Twinkie Little C. Thomas Howell.
I know. He'd be getting out of the shower, just shower fresh in the bed. And all we have seen throughout this movie is Rutger Hauer just dripping with sweat.
This fucking battered drifter.
He is body odor personified.
Really is.
So when Jim comes out, he finds the room empty and he leaves looking for Nash in the lot. And there's cops all over the place. They eventually grab Jim, but it's all good now because they found Ryder in one of the trucks and Nash is tied between them.
Yeah, don't worry. If you were missing misogyny, it's here.
Oh, God, yeah. If Ryder takes his foot off the clutch, the truck will roll forward and tear her in half.
Now, what I love about this moment is that in everything that's happened, the law enforcement's response to this is, why don't we take this guy who may or may not be in on it, and we're going to send him in to resolve this hostage crisis.
Given the way that the cops have responded to like crises in the last 10 years, I think it kind of tracks.
He could do just as good a job as anybody else, I guess. And in that, I mean, he gets her killed.
Yeah, so the cops, for some reason, they put Jim in the truck with Ryder in hopes that he could talk him down. But once again, Ryder insists that Jim stop him, like before in the car when they first met. Unfortunately, this is the moment where the Jim's dead theory just completely comes apart.
Yeah.
And I said, I guess they have to finish the movie somehow. And they wrote themselves into a corner where, honestly, I think by the way that mine was tracking, Jim would have to fucking die in the end for that to happen. And like they can't because he's the fucking hero of the story or some bullshit.
Boo.
Yeah, I know. So Ryder presents Jim with a loaded gun, insists that he shoot him to put a stop to all this.
This is the most 80s bullshit I've ever seen in a movie.
Jim won't because it'll kill Nash. And then they banter some more. And I think it's a really great tense scene. And the way that it's shot is fucking great. Because like he gets into the car and Howard sort of gives him that side eye again. But again, pouring sweat.
Yeah.
It looks like he just did like 20 minutes of pure cardio.
Well, or cocaine. He did a lot of cocaine.
He's got the coke sweats.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, like, the only lighting in the scene is just, like, flashing red and blue. Like, it's a very well-composed set of shots.
But just like every other great moment, and I don't want to say great, but you know what I mean. Every moment in the movie that's pretty decent, it's like, this is because of other people working on this movie who are competent. I don't think this is because of the director. It's certainly not because of the writer. It's usually because the cinematographer is really good at what he's doing. Like there are other competent people that are making this, that are keeping it from being total dog shit.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean,
And this is one of those
why-
moments where it's like, you have competent people. That's why this scene works.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's fucking fine. I think that there's a lot of movies that I enjoy that kind of work out that way. And like I said before, it's that sort of the fact that it's not completely fucking inept and that there were people on here who were doing their best to make a movie that in spite of all of the gaps, I don't mind doing the legwork to make it like a movie, like a coherent story.
I mean, for God's sake, how many movies has Andrew Laszlo saved?
I'd go look that shit up.
I mean, definitely The Funhouse.
Yeah, oh yeah. So, so they banter. I think it's a great scene. Jim refuses to kill Ryder, and so he drives away, tearing Nash in half. Now, mind you, you did not see it. It all happens off screen.
And here's the thing. You did not earn this. I don't give a shit about this character. I don't know who she is. I don't know what she's doing in this movie. She just looks like a kind of typical 80s lady who does nothing for the story. So it's like, I don't know what killing her is supposed to do.
Right. There is an implied set of stakes here, but like you said, it's not earned, so those stakes don't exist.
Right.
You know, we have not gotten to know her in a way that makes her sort of a valuable part of the story. And so the greatest disappointment of the scene is that whatever special effects were set up for this are, if they exist at all, are left on the fucking ground. So you don't even get like a gory set piece out of it, right? Yeah.
And that was the one that like everyone was really upset. Like, oh, she's torn in half. It's like, well, I guess, but you don't see it.
You don't
like,
see it. It's suggested.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the cops, now they get Ryder. They tell Jim that they have no idea who he is. He has no record. Nothing comes up with his fingerprints. He is just a mystery.
But don't worry, Ryder can sense him on the other side of the glass. They have a special connection, a special sexy connection, a Dutch connection, you might say. It is a Dutch touch.
Yeah. And they put Ryder in an interrogation room where he gives him nothing. And then Jim goes in to talk to him, but he just spits on him.
But he also, this is another moment of intimacy where he takes his hand. So is this
Yes.
is now, right? Where he like holds out his hand.
Yeah,
and
he
Ryder
holds his
takes his
hand
hand
out
with
and-
both hands.
Yes. Which is definitely symbolic of like, it's a dominance symbol. Mm-hmm. Right.
And this is when Jeffrey DeMunn says something like, oh, there's something strange going on between the two of you. I don't know what it is. And my note says, I do.
Yep.
I think they want to kiss each other. That's what's happening.
The cops put Ryder in a bus to transport him to jail. Captain takes Jim in his car. On the bus, there's a lot of really great shots of Ryder again against the desert, sort of through the window. Lots of close-ups on the cops' guns, implying that shit's about to go down.
Except what I love about this is they're transporting a very dangerous psychopath. And instead of being vigilant, they're just in the back playing cards.
Yeah, like they do, like some good old boys.
Yeah. This is where the movie goes way off the rails. Like, it was already off the rails, but like, there are no more rails.
Right. So back in the captain's car, Jim steals his gun, lets him out on the side of the road, turning around to chase down the bus. Jim finds the bus. It's driving along, but inside the bus, Ryder is shooting everybody. He opens the back door and literally leaps through Jim's windshield.
It's the wildest moment of the movie.
Roaring like a lion.
Yeah, it's actually really fucking cool. I mean, it's dumb as shit, but it's cool in an action movie kind of way.
Yeah. And he's got one of those fancy Italian shotguns that were in all the 80s action movies. And Jim slams on the brakes and Ryder flies forward, like rolling across the highway violently.
Now, so originally in the original ending of the movie, he's sort of laying on the ground and Jim's supposed to just walk up and shoot him and kill him. And I guess the people, whoever studio execs were involved were like, no, you can't just have him shoot him. He's like disabled on the ground. I would argue, yes, you can.
My memory of first of all, my memory of that teared in half scene was that we actually see it, and I was proven wrong. But I also remember him just walking up to him and just shooting him on the highway.
I mean, I know it's not very dramatic, but like, I feel like what a radical ending would that have been to just have him walk up with no fucking set piece, no dramatics, just shoot him and walk away.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would have been great. It would have been like kind of like an exclamation mark on the whole fucking thing.
But
no.
That's not what we get.
No, so he is undeterred. Ryder gets up, goes to retrieve his shotgun, starts blasting at the police truck. And because it's a horror movie, the truck won't start. So Ryder continues to shoot it while Jim tries to start it. Doesn't eventually start. He drives forward, crashing into Ryder, who goes flying. So now Jim gets up, picks up the shotgun, and inspects Ryder's body, which appears to be dead.
But he's also like weirdly caressing him. He's very gently caressing him with the gun.
Yeah, but he kind of nudges him. He does it with his foot, too.
It's a little bit odd.
Yeah, he turns away, but Ryder gets up, tossing chains and cuffs at his feet.
I think that's like I'm going to, fake you out so you shoot me.
Oh, yeah. Jim turns and shoots him several times. Roll credits.
Now, for all the cops know, they roll up, Jim killed everybody, freed Ryder, and then killed him too.
This
and
is true.
so there is another read of this movie that is kind of the Ryder character on the sort of death drive in order to kill himself and turn Jim into a psychopath in the process.
Oh my God, that'd be fucking great too.
I think that's kind of what he's trying to do. It's just so fucking clunky that it's like, you can't even get me there.
Yeah.
Your version, I think, is way more interesting because it explains the magical bits. Because that's the real lingering thing. Like the psychopath thing, all right, fine, whatever. Like the lingering parts are like, why does he keep showing up in places like he's magical? Because if you never explain it, it's like, oh, you just suck at this. You're bad at writing movies. But like, if you take a moment to fill in the gaps, it's like, all right, it's kind of cool. I'm into it. It's Dust Devil, but it's still kind of cool.
Yeah. That's the thing. And I started out this being like, you know what, I kind of like this movie. I still do, but it's only because I sort of made it the movie that I wish that it was.
Which you really should not have to work hard.
Which I should not have had to have done that,
Right. If you have to go to that length, this is a bad movie.
Right.
And I don't mean like I don't like it. I mean that this is a badly constructed film.
Yeah. Like, it's not without its merits. I think it's got some really good action scenes. Like, it does pyro and, like, a real 80s action very well. There's some moments where I think it's very suspenseful and quite tense. I think that Rutger Hauer is fucking awesome.
Yeah, he saves the whole movie.
He does all of the heavy lifting in it. I think that Howell as his sort of, like, victim is also not bad. He's quite good. But
the fact that it is a young man, and I mean, he comes across as a very young man.
Yeah,
that works very much to their benefit.
Yeah, but the fact that I'm over here like filling in the blanks to sort of make this the movie that it's not in order to fully enjoy it and have a sort of holistic experience really does sort of speak to the fact that it is just empty inside.
Which I think kind of answers the usual question of like, how does this movie hold up? It doesn't.
The thing is I don't think it held up to begin with.
No, but that is literally what my note says. I don't think it was very interesting to begin with.
Yeah, because when we announced this one and we put the trailer up on Instagram, I got a bunch of notes from people who were like, "Oh shit, I really like this movie. It's so fucking mean," and it does have a real mean streak to it. But also,
it has
I don't know.
It is a meanness that underlies it, though. It is a meanness that comes from the person who wrote it. It's not a meanness of like the way that like Italian grindhouse is mean.
Sure. Yeah. I think that, and it's just as I kind of did that setup at the beginning where it turns out that this guy's a fucking murderous lunatic.
Right. The movie is nihilistic. Like
it's a product of his kind of fucked up, very dark imagination that he eventually sort of carries out in real life. So I think that the fact that he's a fucking murderer and a criminal really is kind of what's at the core of all of this.
Which I think that's kind of why it's like, I have to wonder all of these claims of this being a cult film or these like reevaluations. Like, I think we've just run out of legitimately good 80s movies.
I think so. And I definitely dispute any sort of claims of cultness because like we have talked about like what makes a cult movie and it definitely needs it's a movie that has a very it has a group. It has a very idiosyncratic group. This movie does not have that. This is a movie that sort of exists in people's memories as something that it is definitely is not.
And also because
I feel comfortable in making that claim. I think a lot of the people who said like, "Oh shit, I can't wait to hear you guys talk about this," I don't think that these people have seen this movie in a long time.
Right. It's sort of the Ganja and Hess thing.
Yes.
But I think a lot of it too is that it's bound up in it's a lot like the the sort of Indian burial ground trope, where it's like it's just bound up in so many other aspects of 80s culture that you're like, oh shit, yeah, I remember that movie. It's so cool. And it's like, no, you remember a lot of the themes of this movie that were presented in every other corner of culture. And so it just feels ubiquitous. But the movie itself, you've probably either never seen or haven't seen in a very long time, because if you had, you'd know it's not good.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the story is incredibly sloppy nonsense. All the touch points, I think, would be very unfamiliar to people coming at it now. I mean, I think if anything, the only thing that still resonates is how aggressive and crazy the police are.
Yeah.
This one's a dud.
I'm glad that we did it. I think this was a very interesting exercise.
It was.
In evaluating how to evaluate an old movie, but yeah, definitely not the movie that I sort of remember from when I was a kid.
I will take away I've always kind of liked Rutger Hauer anyway, but I come away with more of an appreciation for him because I think he is giving a sort of nuanced performance in an otherwise freaking turd of a film.
Yeah.
But that's about all I'll say for it.
All right. What's next? What are we doing next?
Troll. Speaking of 80s duds.
Oh, shit. We're doing Troll?
Yep.
Oh, yes. Okay, cool. Not Troll 2, people.
No, Troll 2 is it's too much of a softball. I'm not interested.
Yeah,
Troll 1 is a bonkers movie. I watched it a couple months ago, and it is wild.
I'll tell you right now, I do not remember the last time I saw it. It might have been in the 80s.
It is. Just wait. It is. It is a lot of really strange choices.
Oh, great. Cool. All right. So, yeah, we'll be back in a week with 99-cent rental looking at Charles Bronson and the Naked Serial Killer movie, 10 to midnight, and we'll be back in 2 with Troll.
Yep.